Hello everyone. I'd like to read another piece from Idries Shah Remembered, and a piece from the mid-1980s written by a Swiss journalist called Anna Lenz. I've called it Traditions and Wisdom. On a bitterly cold morning in January 1986, I arrived to meet Idries Shah and to interview him for the release of Karakush, his best-selling novel about the ongoing war in Afghanistan. I had walked through St. James's from Green Park and remember the silence of winter and the primness of the buildings. Having arrived the night before from Zurich, it was my first visit to England, and I was awed by it all. Shah's novel had taken me on a journey through the war-torn vistas of Afghanistan, introducing me to elements of cultures that I had at the time no idea that existed. I was so moved by the struggle and by the sense of humility of the Afghan people. It was for this reason that I had pleaded with my editor to allow me to review the book. To my absolute delight, she had suggested that I travel to London and interview the author. During the short journey, I had speed read a lot of the novel once again, tracing the arc of the story through chapters that had made such a huge impression on me. By the time I reached London, my mind was still firmly in the mountain recesses of the Hindu Kush. The book's publicist had arranged our meeting. I had been told to make my way to the prestigious Athenaeum Club on the corner of Pall Mall and Waterloo Place, and that Idries Shah would be waiting for me in the lobby at 10 o'clock. The night before traveling, I had called my father, an Anglophile par excellence. He had informed me that the Athenaeum was the ultimate bastion of learned and literary English society, and that its founders had included Darwin, Dickens, Faraday, and Trollope. Before my father hung up the telephone, he gave me a solemn warning. "Make sure you wear a dress," he said, "and don't even think of wearing jeans or running shoes." With apprehension, I approached the grand white building and mounted the few steps that led up to the great mahogany doors. I would have looked for a sign on the exterior, but as my father had explained, the most celebrated London clubs never have a nameplate or a sign, because those who need to know them, and those who are not supposed to know them are not encouraged to visit. I saw Idries Shah through the glass door even before I entered. He was standing tall beside a stand on which a fresh copy of the Times newspaper was displayed. Dressed in tails, a porter opened the door for me, smiled warmly, and signaled to Mr. Shah. A moment after that, my hand was being clasped by the most famous writer I had ever wanted to meet, and I was being greeted by the same face that, a moment before, had been frowning over the pages of the Times. The first thing that struck me was Idries Shah's presence. He had dark eyes, the kind that could appear cold or even unnerving to someone so young and inexperienced as me. But at the same time, there was a warmth in his expression and a restless intelligence. Dressed impeccably in a dark grey suit with a paisley silk tie, starched white shirt, and expertly polished black Oxfords, there was no ostentation at all, as if everything about him was understated. And yet there was something unmistakably unconventional about him, a subtle air of being unable or unwilling to endure the rigid expectations of the world in which he moved. We exchanged pleasantries, and Mr. Shah invited me to accompany him up into the grand sitting room on the first floor. As we walked slowly up the magnificent staircase, I took in the huge oil paintings and details of it all. "If you want to understand this place," said Shah as we ascended, "all you have to do is look at the clock." He motioned to the dial of a large, plain wall clock set into the pink-colored marble. I frowned. Looks very conventional, I said. Shah smiled. At first glance, you would think so, he replied, but look a little closer, and it's not quite what it seems. I looked again. As I did so, Shah studied my face, waiting for me to unlock a mystery. I see it, I said. There are 2 number 7s and no number 8. When I asked why the clock should be different from all the others in the world, Shah drew a hand down over the sides of his mouth. I like to think it's an example of the mind workings of the wise fool Mullah Nasruddin, he said. Foolishness that is at the same time a rarefied form of genius. We strode the last steps up into the grand sitting room, passing a ledger on a stand in which club members who were also Nobel laureates were honored. Making our way to the far end of the cavernous room, which was utterly empty of people, we sat in low leather armchairs beside a roaring coal fire. As if summoned by an invisible signal, a butler appeared with a teapot and 2 delicate porcelain cups on the table between us. Did you read Karakush? Shah asked gently. Twice, I admitted, once before I knew I was going to meet you, and once again yesterday when I was on my way here from Zurich. I surmise that you are a fast reader as well as thorough, he said. Until that point in my journalist career, I had mostly interviewed the kind of novelists who wrote books for the beach. But in the handful of minutes that I had been with Idries Shah, I knew he wasn't like them. A scholar of Afghanistan, he was better known as a philosopher and most uniquely as a master storyteller in the classical sense, someone who understood that truth could be conveyed more powerfully through narrative than through exposition. I asked what had compelled him to write Karakush. Shah took a sip of tea and then stared into the fire's flames. Afghanistan is a land that has been misrepresented for centuries, he said. Western intellectuals have tried to reduce it to a simple equation of tribes, rebels, and warlords, but it's none of these things, not any of them alone. Afghanistan, you see, is a world unto itself, shaped by traditions and wisdom that outsiders rarely perceive or understand.